Okay, we've got a lot to get through, so I think I'm just going to get straight into it. I came up with an idea, and I'm really proud of it. It is hopefully going to explain how consciousness emerges, how, like, what the dynamic is between awareness in a present moment and consciousness behind it, potentially how the mind operates, how humans reach maturity, and, like, I don't want to say enlightenment, but kind of, you know. I just don't like all the connotations that brings along sometimes. Like, it feels like ambitious, but at the same time, this is an ambitious idea. So, enlightenment as well. How I think it will explain where depression and anxiety are rooted, and how trauma can reverberate throughout the rest of one's life, and then that on a cultural scale as well, how a cultural trauma spins out of control and changes the course of history forever. So, big promise, and I guess we'll see if I can deliver on it. So yeah, effectively the thought that I had that got me there was effectively, it was like 3 a.m, and I kind of thought of my life as like trickling grains of sand, and as you trickle grains of sand, the tower builds and it simultaneously grows upwards and outwards. Like, the foundation of the base needs to grow out, but also upwards. And then a similar image that came to mind was like a drill bit. Like, if you imagine a big drill bit that they would use if they were like mining somewhere, it's like a drill pointing directly upwards, and it's constantly spiraling, and the tip isn't necessarily going anywhere, but it's always spiraling in on itself, and that's kind of where the trickle grains of sand come in, because they all build upwards like that. So I had this kind of spiral shape that as you grew up it got wider, but what really unlocked this idea for me is I took that pyramid shape and I was able to like mentally invert it. So if, look, everybody imagines their life as like a linear story, right? Or at least these are going to be so obnoxious, we're just going to power through. Everyone imagines their life in a line and tells themselves a linear story, like this happened, so that happened. But, and at one end of the line is your birth, your origin, like where it all started, and the other end of the line is where you are right now. There are so many helicopters. The other end of the line is this moment right now, that we're in. Like, this is the edge of the line. And when I say that drill bit sort of thing, when I say the drill bit, it is literally you are on the edge of that. And if I were to step into the next moment, I would be stepping into uncharted territory. So we've got this line that people tell their story with, and we've got the origin here as well. And the original grains of sand analogy, the drill bit, that one had your current moment being the middle, and your birth being somewhere at the bottom or underneath the foundation of it all. But I decided to flip that on its head, and I'm really glad I did. So instead, you start at an origin point, and then instead you grow outwards over time, and I want you to see this like a spiraling shape. So for example, you start here, and then you go up, and then you kind of go this way, and then you slowly kind of figure out where the boundaries are of your life. And you're doing this with everything, like don't touch the fireplace, and I can't go through that fence, and like, oh, I shouldn't swear at my mum, like, you know, those are pretty average examples, but I think you know what I mean. You figure out where the boundaries are of your physical life, and then one day you turn, let's say 8 years old, and your dad tells you to do the dishes, and then because you do that, like, he's effectively telling you to grow up, become mature, grow up. And I think we literally grow upwards. So we go from this 2-dimensional spiral shape into a 3-dimensional vase sort of thing, because it you start building on the foundation that you grew. So you go from a plate to a bowl, and then it just goes upwards and upwards. And I think it's cool that you're constantly building on top of what you already know, and you end up creating this like vessel for yourself. So all of your human experiences that you become more ambitious, more courageous, more curious, you grow outwards, and that extends you. But everything in moderation. You don't want to go too far, because then the integrity of your structure won't be solid. So yeah, you've got this shape, and then one day you turn 15 years old, for example, and this is all happening rather unconsciously, but you go, holy shit, I'm up pretty high. And you don't know how you got there, but you decide to kind of look back, like into your mind for the first time, and I feel like you're looking downwards into this spiral shape, because that is your entire past, and it's this wacky, contorted, kaleidoscope looking thing. You don't really know what you're looking at. And I think there's a feeling of vertigo associated with that, and like vertical, growing upwards. I think that dizziness you feel when you look into yourself, that's a very raw human sensation that I don't think anybody has really defined like that before. And then I think there's a depression where you don't like the integrity of the structure you're looking at, and you go, oh, I can't continue, I don't want to continue, I didn't sign up for this, you know. And alternatively, you can get anxious from it, because you're like, the integrity of this structure is not sufficient enough that I can take another step. If I step into the next moment, this entire structure might collapse beneath me, and then what? And I think that in my mind is a really cool way to define both of those, because they're both very, like, they're the same, but they're also two sides of the same coin, if you know what I mean. So I think that's really fascinating. And then I think the spiral tends to grow inwards and outwards. So just as I was talking about vertical and vertigo, we've got the words introvert and extrovert that exist, and both contain the word vert, so like tall, vertical sort of thing. So I think sometimes it's growing outwards, and that's when your awareness is growing outwards. You're trying to capture new experience, and you're trying to absorb it, but then you need to reflect on it. So then once you've grown out a bit, you then have to grow inwards, and you kind of capture it that way, and you get a better opportunity, because now, instead of just, if you grew outwards, extroverted your whole life, you wouldn't have a very good perspective to reflect on your life from. But if you then grow introverted, suddenly you've got a really good way to see down, and you get much more nuanced angles of how your life has come to be. So I think like there's a dance going on there that's definitely a path to maturity. So we've had a line which then became a spiral, and the spiral created a vase-ish type shape which is growing inwards and outwards, so it's quite abstract. And then what I want to suggest on top of this is that we've got this one spiral, but if we were to zoom in at any one point of the spiral, what I want to suggest is that is also a spiral. It's a fractal pattern, and then if you zoomed in on that spiral, it would be another tinier spiral, and you can go all the way down through awareness like that if you want. And what happens is that if you get down to like an atomic level of this, because the line is your awareness, at any point of the line, that is like my present ability to sense stuff. And if you zoom in like spiral after spiral after spiral after spiral, all the way down to the minute gritty detail of it, like a single grain of sand, for example, you would almost operate in a similar way that a atom would floating in space, like an electron type thing, where you're buzzing upwards, down, left, right, in, out, and you're always, because you're dealing with the mechanisms of like 40 different spirals that are layered on top of each other, and then it's up to you to kind of buzz in the right direction. So everybody has moments where they have up, and then they have down, and then they kind of slingshot further up and down. And that's why it's like everybody has bad days and all the whole human experience, but it's just about the trajectory. And then there's the idea of like transcending above a feeling. And I feel like there are lots of emotions that you could easily explain by being up and down, right? But what you can do is if you zoom out from your up and down spiral, what you'll find is that up and down was actually a part of a horizontal spiral, and that gives you a different perspective of what you were doing and why. And what's really cool about the game is that as soon as you feel like I have transcended above whatever I was going through, it's actually just a part of a larger spiral, a larger momentum that you haven't been able to frame yet. So I think this is a really, really cool idea because it shows how consciousness emerges. And what I want to suggest is that consciousness is the negative space inside the vase. That is who you are. And I believe that because I have every valuable part of a cup right here. None of us can see it. You can't see it, I can't see it. And that's because I don't actually have the cup here, the tangible bit of a cup to put here and be like, that's the valuable part of a cup. I hope that this part makes sense because sometimes it gets lost. I should have brought a cup out with me, actually. But as soon as I had a cup here, I would be able to point at the negative space on the inside and be like, that's valuable, that's a cup. But the valuable part, the essential part, I suppose, that is everywhere. And that's what the negative space is. So I've lived an entire life, and everything that I've done has revealed something about me, because it has given me a perspective which I can look into the vessel. But simultaneously, like have you ever seen one of those classic American movies where there's the kid, he's 7 years old, he climbs up the diving board, he gets to the top, gets too scared, and then decides not to, and he goes down, and he regrets it for 15 years of his life or something? That genuinely might be a moment where he was just starting to grow up, right? But that moment shamed him, it was cowardice, and it created a crevice in his spiral he was building, and every time he goes back over that bit, he's got to go down again and around and down again and around and down. And because of that, it stagnated his growth, and he's not going to be able to grow into as big of a spiral as he would have if he jumped off the diving. But what I want to suggest is that the spiral part is actually completely irrelevant, because it's not you. All the physical awareness spiral bit is what illuminates you so you can see it. But you are also, even though that kid didn't jump off the diving board, he is still that kid that did. He just hasn't lived that experience that revealed that to him. So the spiral ends up being completely besides the point, which is a super cool thing for depression and anxiety and stuff, because say that people were say that people were neglected as a child and it stagnated their growth. They didn't learn how to be curious, they didn't learn how to be articulate or whatever. It stagnated their growth, they were stunted, and then they only ever grew so small. That feeling of you being in here instead of everything, that feeling of being on the inside is so claustrophobic and so suffocating that no wonder people feel terrible if that were to happen to them. This is all that they've known, this is all they're able to see of themselves, and they were never given the opportunity to actually maximize their potential. But the realization that it isn't the physical spiral that matters, it's the essence on the inside, I just think that's wicked. And that's cool. Imagine there is a CEO that's seen it all, he's done it all, he's in movies, he has this massive awe-inspiring spiral that you can look at and be like, wow, that guy has lived a life. He is so self-actualized. Whereas there is probably a homeless person on the street that hasn't had any of that experience, doesn't believe in himself. Maybe, I don't want to put too many assumptions on him. But effectively, I want to suggest that he doesn't have as great of a spiral as this mammoth of a man over here. But intrinsically, at a very essential level, these two people are equally as valuable. The difference is this guy has had all of the opportunity to realize himself, whereas he hasn't. So it's just like the human spirit is shared between us all, and we're all just kind of reflections of each other all the time. I really, really like this idea. I think it's really cool, because once you realize that the spiral doesn't matter, it can kind of dissolve away. Like, it becomes really good, because once you recognize why it is valuable, you can use it as a tool, but also it doesn't become your be-all, end-all. Like, I think, from this current moment, at the end of the line, the present moment I'm in right now, I imagine my train of thought like a laser pointer, and the inside of my vase, in all of its weird, quirky angles, it's all covered in mirrors. And when I shine this laser through it, it illuminates this trail all the way through my entire spirit, consciousness, whatever. And it illuminates that, and that is the clarity that I see. It's my tunnel of vision, I suppose. And if I do that enough times consistently, then I do invent like neural highways that my trains of thought go down. But all I need to do is wait some time, get a fresher perspective, and I'll literally see it from a different angle, shine that laser pointer again, I will illuminate a different part of me. And that's just, it's incredible to think about how proud I can be of what I have learned of myself throughout how much I've illuminated, but also I just based on, if you take this idea and run with it, there is absolutely no way that I've illuminated more than 20% of who I am. And that's only within my current spiral. That's not even including everything that I am yet to become, which is, it's just such an awe-inspiring thought. Like, it brings out my inner explorer. Like, I feel like it's uncharted territory, you know? And what's really cool as well is that, like, I feel like if I ever am caught in an emotion, I do just need to zoom out and see that it's forget about the little spiral, think about the larger trajectory. And once you can be more purposeful about which way you're spinning, I think that is hugely powerful. So I think, like, this idea, right? I think it's really cool. I think you'll agree. But what the ultimately cool part about it is that I don't think I've imposed anybody, I don't think I've left anybody out of the equation with this. I think Buddhists could take this idea, this framework, this model, and they could run with it, and they could use this framework to justify why Dharma is a thing, and why yin and yang are these balancing forces. But in the same way, I feel like Christians could also take this idea and use this as justification for the existence of God, and the fact that they are God's servants and things like that. Like, they go about their life in that way. And also, atheists can perfectly believe in this model, because I didn't bring up anything really spiritual. I brought up spirits and stuff and souls and that sort of thing, but I think most atheists are okay with that idea. And effectively what I want this idea to be is I want everybody to understand it and use it as kind of the battleground for philosophical discussion. If we agree on how the physics of it might work, then that is where it just opens up this debate, and people can actually start visualizing it in a tangible way, instead of it being like, because most people are just living in their own worlds. But I think this really is all inclusive, and I want the world to see it. It's really cool. So anyway, I'll leave it there. It's been a while. Thank you for entertaining this idea. Thank you for listening to me. I really, really like this idea, and I'm going to say it many more times over until I feel like I'm truly comfortable with sharing it with the world. But yeah, for now I just want to share it with you, and thanks for listening. So, kia ora.